is Worf 26, and I'm here to bring you the first review I have on the channel. It's for Poltergeist. Now, I know just last week I had done a tribute to Robin Williams, but this is in fact my first official movie review, and the movie that I'm going to discuss is Poltergeist. Now, if anyone's seen the movie Poltergeist, they would know that for itself, it is the first part of a trilogy. And the movie itself is directed by Steven Spielberg and produced by Toby Hopper. And for me, growing up, it was just such an amazing movie in terms of, it wasn't an over-the-top gory film as you see a lot of films today, especially in the last 10, 15 years. They try to sell people on like the amount of blood you can put in a horror movie, which for me, it does it sometimes, but it's not exactly, like the factors for a really good, horror film. Like, to me, a horror film should consist of, a few good scares, the unpredictable nature of what a movie can bring, especially with, like for me, a lot of 80s and 90s movies just define how good movies were 20, 30 years ago even. And it sucks because you don't see the direction that most people took with the filmmaking they had back 20, 30 years ago. But for me, Poltergeist touched on so many levels for me because as a kid, it was probably like the first or second horror movie I watched, right? So, it was something that stuck with me. It was something I enjoyed. And, as I said, it's the first of a trilogy, but the other two, in my opinion, weren't all that great. And of course, the remake happened, and that was just awful. I don't know if anyone who watched it actually enjoyed it. I certainly did not. See, the original 1982 version, it had so many things going for it. A great cast, at its time too. There were so many great horror movies that were coming out in the 80s. So, this to me is actually one of the ones that actually stood out as an example for people to go off of and to have I would say that it inspired some of the better horror movies in terms of like haunted house horror movies that you would see even today's modern age. But, for me, there are also a lot of interesting facts about the film outside of, the actual story in the film itself. There were a lot of different intangibles that happened with the film. A lot of people felt the film was cursed, and there were so many contributing factors to that as well. So the film Poltergeist centers around a middle-class family living in a California suburb, and the home that they actually live in is built over an old cemetery. So what's happened is they're experiencing paranormal activity, and, I guess the daughter is, she's taken to another dimension, and they're trying to communicate with her and bring her back because they don't know, exactly what's happened. So they bring in a paranormal research team to investigate, and throughout the movie, you see that it's your modern 80s classic horror. To me, like I had said earlier, Poltergeist is just a great movie. I don't want to give away too much of the story, but what the family comes together and they find a way to, communicate with Carol Ann, which is the youngest daughter that's been kidnapped by these spirits. It's a bit of a crazy concept, the story itself, but if you've not seen Poltergeist, it is an absolute classic in terms of horror films. So without giving away too much, it has a lot of good scares, and it has that typical jump out of your seat sort of moments that you come to expect from a good horror movie. So for me, Poltergeist is definitely a film that I would say looking back on like Steven Spielberg films, because this is actually a Steven Spielberg film, and it also comes from Toby Hopper, who was responsible for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and like I had said, the film itself is really what I was saying about the different, mysteries surrounding the actual film itself. There were so many different theories as to the film on what was going on outside of the production. A lot of people would go home after doing film production and experience paranormal activity, and there were also a string of deaths that were very untimely that may or may not have been related to the supposed curse. Now, the first part of the curse was Dominic Dunn, who played Dana in the first movie. She was the older sister of Carol Ann. And what had happened was she was murdered by her boyfriend, and this was only a few months after the production of the first film, and it was very tragic. It was, she was very young actress, so that was a very, very unfortunate incident. And also, the actor who played Carol Ann, Heather O'Rourke, had died at a very young age. She was 12, and she had died just after doing the third Poltergeist film, I should say. So, and that also, and there was also another gentleman who had played Kane. I think his name was, it was Julian Beck, and he had played Kane in the second Poltergeist movie. And while he was filming the movie, he was actually, he was battling cancer, and I guess he was well aware of it, so were the film producers, and he died during filming. And there was a lot of different things that had gone on with the film. There was also a lot of things that didn't come out about the film initially, because it was really a lot to think about. Like, especially in the first film, instead of using props for the skeletons, they were actually using real skeletons. And for people that didn't know this, I mean, like, that's just in terms of respect to somebody's, burial, you definitely would look at that and say, really, you're going to use somebody's actual skeleton in a film? And so, obviously that was one part of it. Like, they were using real skeletons, and to me, that's very disrespectful and dishonorable to do that to anybody's remains. And that they say that was obviously part of what contributed to the actual curse itself. Now, these are all obviously just theories, but it's interesting to note. And also, with the film itself, it had a lot of problems. I mean, people, as I had said earlier, would go home and they would experience like paranormal activity in their own homes outside of the film, outside of the production. So, to that end, it was also very scary. So aside from all that, now to talk about the film itself, Poltergeist, to me, it was such a great film because it was one of those great 80 horror films that, we had, we were very privileged to have 30 years ago. And the junk they make today, I can't even really understand why they even put out some of the films they have today. So to that end, Poltergeist is definitely something that, I would say if you haven't seen it, you should see it. So, if I'm to say, for a critical rating on Poltergeist, of course it's the first of 3 movies in a trilogy, this being the best of the trilogy, obviously also with the remake, and I would recommend not seeing the remake. It was so awful. It's not a film even worth watching. It was very disappointing. So if I was to give Poltergeist a rating out of 5, I would give it a solid 4. And that's my movie review for Poltergeist. I hope you enjoyed.